Peace, infinite waters diving deep once again. I woke up like this, deep divers all magical and fly, just, woo, breathing in that good ass prana, baby. Raising the frequency, I feel so much better now. Raising the vibration, I feel so much better now. Sending you a wave of good ass energy, deep divers. The cat down the road said, you feel so much better now. Look, let me say a big shout out to everybody out there who's joined the new Ralph Smart Patreon page for all new exclusive content that's going to help you become your greatest version. Patreon.com/Ralph Smart. Deep divers, click the link down below and be inspired. Also, go and get the brand new book, Feel Alive 2. Unlock Your Infinite Power by Ralph Smart, the secret recipe to becoming your greatest version. Now available at ralphsmart.com/thebook. Deep divers, click the link down below and go and get yourself an early copy. It's also available on Amazon. And 10 years in the making, 500 pages. You're going to love it. Now, some sad news in DC. Plane crash. Okay, it's been all over the media. And it's a very sad story because 67 people lost their lives. And I want to take a moment to send good energy to all the friends and families of people who lost their lives in that horrific event because they need it. You know, you got people going back and forth and pointing fingers. But this is a time to remind yourself that innocent people lost their lives, okay? And we have to always remember the victims. With that being said, the DC plane crash, things they're not telling you about the DC plane crash. Deep divers, this channel is all about becoming your greatest version. And there are even lessons in this tragedy that we can learn from to help us become our greatest version. This information right here is going to blow your mind and inspire you at the same time. Hit that like button right now if you support the real. Hit that like button right now if you support the real, deep divers, because we got a whole lot to talk about. Look, if you are watching this video, this is your confirmation. You're about to overcome anything that's been weighing heavy on your heart and mind. And soon, your soul will be at peace. If you're ready for that, just thank the cat down the road. Where did it go off to? Deep divers. So when I heard this news, I'm like, this is crazy. This is really tragic as well, because it made me think that it's 2025, deep divers. This should not be happening in 2025. So once again, I want to send good energy to everybody who knows someone who was affected by that tragedy. We're about to take a deep dive, deep divers. And we ain't even had breakfast yet. Can I get a hello there? So, the DC plane crash, things they're not telling you. So, what I'm going to do is just play you some background stories about this whole event. Because if you don't know, I'm sure you do by now. A Black Hawk helicopter crashed with a commercial American Airlines plane in DC, Ronald Reagan Airport. It's been all over the news, right? So let's just recap.
Because Pete Montine is back with me. Pete, what have you learned?
I have this statement now, a bombshell statement, really, from the Federal Aviation Administration. I'm going to read it to you verbatim. PSA Airlines Bombardier CRJ-700 regional jet collided in midair with a Sikorsky H-60 helicopter, that's a Black Hawk, while on approach to runway 33 at Reagan National Airport around 9 p.m. local time. PSA was operating flight 5342 for American Airlines. It departed Wichita, Kansas. FAA will investigate. NTSB will investigate. NTSB will lead the investigation, the FAA says, and the FAA says it'll provide more information as it comes in. The huge news here Not only was this a crash involving a commercial flight, this flight 5342 from Wichita, Kansas to Reagan National Airport, but that this was a midair collision with a helicopter. This was a midair collision not with any helicopter. This was a midair collision with a H-60, which is more colloquially known as the Black Hawk helicopter. The approach, I'm stumbling over my words here because this is just so staggering that there is a midair collision involving a commercial airliner.
That was as soon as it happened. That report was as soon as it happened. So even the reporter is shocked, like, oh my gosh, how could this happen? Right? With the technology the Black Hawk has, and it's crazy, right? People still don't believe it. I don't even believe it. I got friends and relatives who are actually in the DC area. So I'm even shocked, okay? Now, Trump came out saying some things like the DEI are to blame. That's diversity, equality, and inclusion, because they're hiring the wrong people. And then he had some pushback from people. Let me play you this, deep divers.
We must have only the highest standards for those who work in our aviation system. I changed the Obama standards from very mediocre at best to extraordinary. You remember that. Only the highest aptitude, they have to be the highest intellect and psychologically superior people were allowed to qualify for air traffic controllers. And then when I left office and Biden took over, he changed them back to lower than ever before. I put safety first. Obama, Biden, and the Democrats put policy first.
Are DEI policies at the FAA to blame?
I put my head in my hands, Pam, when the president said that. This is something that has been pushed by the far right for a few months now, that DEI policies are to blame in a degradation of safety in aviation in the United States. But frankly, the president is getting out ahead of his skis here. What he has said is not only unprofessional, unpresidential, inconsiderate of the status of this investigation, but frankly, it is just unhinged. That he could even say with any sort of certainty that diversity, equity, and inclusion policies had any part to play in this accident. Remember that 67 people are dead. I hate to get so upset here, but this is something that investigators will really need to pick apart piece by piece, and that is going to take some really significant time. We're not even 24 hours after this crash. We're barely even 12 hours after this crash. And he is saying with a lot of certainty that the blame is on DEI, and the blame is in some ways on air traffic control and air traffic controller hiring. I have to feel for the air traffic controllers in the tower at Reagan National Airport who had to essentially sit there helplessly and make the call to first responders to say we have a serious aircraft crash at 8:48 last night.
Now, anytime a tragic event happens, a lot of people want to point the finger as soon as it happens, and you have to really wait, and you have to think, and you have to have clarity to say, okay, innocent people lost their lives, 67 people, right? That's a lot of people. Say their names. Take a look at their faces. They aren't just statistics. They're not just statistics. They are human beings. They're people. They have a whole inner circle, friends, family. They're in relationships. Some of them have children. And their lives have been shattered and prematurely stopped. So we've got to remind ourselves to have humanity. Anytime you have a tragedy, have humanity. Anytime you have a tragedy, have humanity. I wrote down this, deep divers. Remember the victims who have lost their lives and the families who left them way too soon. Okay, that's what we have to take into consideration, right? Because just blaming people all of a sudden, you now forget about the people who've lost their lives, which is so important, right? So always remind yourself of that. Now, let me play you this because a lot of people were kind of aggravated by Trump's statements. Take a listen to this.
The FAA's diversity push includes focus on hiring people with severe intellectual and psychiatric disabilities. That is amazing. A group within the FAA, another story, determined that the workforce was too white, that they had concerted efforts to get the administration to change that and to change it immediately. This was in the Obama administration, but they actually came out with a directive, too white. And we want the people that are competent.
He had theories about what may have caused this that came out well before we've learned anything from the NTSB. What do you think is appropriate at this point in terms of how you think about what may have been a factor here in this crash? And is there any truth to what the president said yesterday?
I'm sorry, but I was disgusted by that entire press conference and the statements that were made for people that I depended upon throughout my career. There's the qualifications that are required for a controller are stringent, and it's a lot of work. It's at least 5 years before somebody can actually be soloed, for instance, at a particular facility, and each facility has its own difficulty level. Same thing for pilots. Pilots aren't hired. There's a specific standard for hiring pilots, whether they're black, white, purple, brown. It doesn't make any difference. Those standards have to be met, and nobody's going to get hired that doesn't meet those particular standards.
Now, Trump kind of blaming the DEI, right? So a lot of people are saying actually that's not the case. So people are going back and forth. And now, things they're not telling you about this DC plane crash. This is what I've discovered in my own research, is that actually there were some mistakes and it involved human error, okay? Especially from the Black Hawk. Now, the reason why is because it was flying too high, and also the air traffic controller, there was only one. The supervisor said, hey, you can go home early. You can go home early, right? The supervisor told one of the air traffic controllers that they could go home early. And normally you need two of them, right? One to monitor the plane, the other one to monitor the helicopter. There was only one on duty. So that was an error. So when you take a look at this whole story, you realize that this could have been prevented. It's 2025, people. This should not be happening. There is no reason for this to happen with all of this technology we have right now in 2025. But who am I to talk? I'm no expert, right? But listen to an expert who actually has flown a Black Hawk helicopter.
3 different things happen. First of all, they only had a crew of 3. And if you're flying a visual flight plan in a crowded airspace like this, they really should have had 2 crew chiefs in the back of the helicopter to clear each side, as the pilots only have visibility from straight ahead 12 to 3 o'clock, or 12 from 9 o'clock to 12 o'clock. So you only have visibility of the front 180 degrees. Your crew chiefs clear the back. If you only have 1 crew chief, how much can you clear? The second one is, it is, whether they were on night vision goggles at that time or not, it is a very cluttered airspace with a lot of lighting and the lights reflecting on the river. And so with that, it's easy to kind of get a little disoriented as far as the height. They were supposed to be at 200 feet, which is the helicopter routing in that area, and it wouldn't have been a conflict, but they were not at 200 feet. Obviously, reportedly, the incident happened at around 350 to 400 feet as the airliner was descending. So that they were at the wrong height. So that's a pilot error. The first would be a policy error or choice. And then the third is air traffic control said, do you have the CRJ in sight? Well, there were two aircraft in their field of view, and actually only one was really obvious to them. And that was if you watch the video, the aircraft taking off in the foreground is probably the one they were facing, the pilots were facing, and said, yeah, I got it. The air traffic control should have said, do you have the aircraft at 5 o'clock? So they were looking at the rear. If they had done that, the Black Hawk is maneuverable. The Black Hawk could have moved out of the way quickly. They can move on a dime and make that happen.
So, human errors, right? There was a pilot error, right? In the Black Hawk helicopter, because it was flying too high, okay? But there was also an air traffic controller error as well. And there was some speculation. Was that the case? Was not that? Was maybe it wasn't the case, but then it's confirmed that actually it was the case, that actually the air traffic supervisor said one of them can go home early. So it only left one there to kind of monitor the two aircrafts, one aircraft, one helicopter. Take a listen.
We have some breaking news in relation to this story. NBC News has confirmed with a source familiar with the investigation that an air traffic control supervisor in the tower at Washington Reagan National Airport let a controller leave their shift early. Now, this detail was first reported by the New York Times, and that meant a single controller was basically handling both the plane and the helicopter traffic in the area. NBC News reported last night that typically a controller is dedicated to helicopters while another controller handles the planes. Now, it's allowed that one controller can do both jobs, but it's not preferred. Now, the NTSB is looking into whether the Black Hawk helicopter was flying at too high an altitude. They won't know the chopper's precise altitude until they get their hands, of course, on that very important black box. Now, the NTSB has met with the families last night, which is, of course, typical in the aftermaths of these types of incidents. Also to say that the NTSB has also brought in an in-house expert who is a veteran Black Hawk helicopter pilot from Alaska to assist in this investigation. So if you're joining us on Sky News, the breaking news is that we can confirm via NBC, our news partners, that a source familiar with the investigation at the Air Traffic Control Supervisor Tower, that they allowed a staff member to leave that shift early. Of course, this was first reported by the New York Times, and it meant that a single controller was handling both the plane and helicopter traffic in that area.
That's unfortunate. So once again, it's a tragedy that could have definitely been prevented. And, you know, when these things happen, I always say, okay, you got to make sure this never happens again. You got to make sure innocent people never lose their lives again in this sort of situation. You know, when this story first broke, there was a story about this figure skater, because a lot of people on that plane were figure skaters and they lost their lives. But there was this American figure skater, John Maravilla, right? And this is why as soon as stories come out, you got to have discernment, because the story was that his dog had saved his life, because it says not allowed past gate to board flight. So he was in Kansas and people thought he was going to DC. But when he clarified this, he said, actually, no, that was a rumor. I was actually going to Atlanta, right? So you got to be careful about just jumping on stories, deep divers, right? So once again, these are the victims. Awful. Okay. And we have to remind ourselves that, you know, it's not just the DEI, but it's human error, okay? Because you have disabled pilots who are very capable. You also have people who don't deserve to be there, right? So take a listen to this disabled pilot, what he had to say about Trump's comments.
Out front now is Miles O'Brien. And obviously, Miles, you have spent a career covering this industry, covering tragedies in this industry, and you are a pilot yourself. So this investigation is in its early stages. It's honed in, obviously, on the elevation and the altitude of the helicopter, but we don't know what we don't know right now. What are your leading theories from the information we do have?
Something was happening in that cockpit of that Black Hawk helicopter, which may have distracted the crew, perhaps as part of the training mission. Perhaps they were having difficulty with the night vision goggles. Who knows? The cockpit voice recorder, which I'm pretty certain will be recovered and the data will come out of it, should shed a lot of light of what was happening, what distractions might have occurred. It is hard to see moving air traffic at night in a city with all those background lights. But that is still the responsibility of that crew to see and avoid traffic. And obviously that did not happen here.
No, it didn't. And there was just no time. I mean, as we said, the slides weren't deployed. There was no, at that point, you're low enough to the ground, texting. I mean, there was nothing, just a silence, and clearly so sudden. President Trump has had blame for this in several quarters. He had referenced DEI initiatives. He also specifically referenced the FAA hiring people with severe disabilities. Let me just play for you exactly what he said, Miles.
The FAA is actively recruiting workers who suffer severe intellectual disabilities, psychiatric problems, and other mental and physical conditions under a diversity and inclusion hiring initiative spelled out on the agency's website. Can you imagine?
So, Miles, he then went on to specify that one of the disabilities he was referring to is missing extremities. Now, this is something actually you know about. You can speak to personally. You're a licensed pilot. You lost an arm in an accident. So I want to give you a chance to respond to that.
Yeah, number one, Aaron, let's not forget what it must be like to have lost a loved one and hear this whole, literally with your loved one still underwater, here it turned into this weird political thing. But as personally, as someone who was a pilot, lost my arm, and went through the process of getting recertified to fly, I can attest to you that I went through every hoop and got over every bar an able-bodied individual would in order to be recertified to fly. The FAA simply does not forsake safety in order to include disabilities in the system. I am part of the aviation community because I persevered through that, and it's an affront to me and all other disabled people to allow that statement to come into play. So it's unfortunate in the context of a terrible tragedy relative to the tragedy these families face. I guess it's not as big a deal, but it is a gut punch to those of us who are disabled and aviators.
I'm going to stop it right there. So, deep divers, I've given you a kind of breakdown, things they weren't telling you about this DC plane crash. Once again, remind yourself that innocent people have lost their lives. That's who our focus should be on right now, and their families. And once again, condolences to the people who have lost their lives, because it is a tragedy and it's something that should never happen again. Deep divers, hit that like button right now if you support The Real. Share this video with someone, subscribe to the channel. Once again, hit that like button right now if you support The Real. And make sure you join the new Ralph Smart Patreon page for all new exclusive content that's going to help you become your greatest version. Patreon.com/Ralph Smart. Deep divers, click the link down below and be inspired, and go and get the brand new book, Feel Alive 2, Unlock Your Infinite Power by Ralph Smart. The secret recipe to becoming your greatest version. Now available at ralphsmart.com/thebook. Click the link down below. Get yourself an early copy. Also on Amazon. 10 years in the making. 500 pages. You're going to love it. Also, go and get all the new designs, the Good Oz Prana shirts at ralphsmart.com/clothes and spreadshirt.com if you're in America. And if you're a sexy ass model, whoa, with a whole lot of heart, you want to model the clothing, well, go and buy some. And if you want a one-to-one consultation with me so I can help you become your greatest version personally, make sure you book it at ralphsmart.com/one-to-one sessions. Deep divers, remind yourself that life is so precious. At any moment, it could disappear. And that's the reason why when you have tragic events, as sad as it is, you have to start honoring the people who are alive. Call your mum right now. Call your dad. Even phone the cat down the road. Tell it how much you love it. Deep divers, tell the cat down the road how much you love it. And that's why I'm just saying, feel so good to be alive, baby. Can I get a hello there? Let's breathe. Whoa, breathing in that good ass prana, baby. Peace. Infinite waters, diving deep once again. Stay well, stay healthy. Peace. Yo! Once again, deep divers, hit that like button right now if you support the real. Share this video, subscribe to the channel. Once again, hit that like button right now if you support the real. And leave a comment down below of gratitude and appreciation. And let me know how this video opened your eyes and inspired you. One love, peace. Wow.